we're down there taking care of those people in South Dallas. And he said, when you told me that you folks wanted to come every single week and take care of the needs of this neighborhood, I thought, we'll see about a month of that. He said, a year in, I'm thinking you might mean it. He said, you people bit into this thing and you just won't let go. You just bulldogs, you know. So 5 years of bulldogging in South Dallas, celebrated next Saturday morning. If you want to meet us there, if you'd like to meet us there, the address is on the website and on the app. Just punch in the address and get a map straight down and be there around 11 o'clock. Or if you'd like to go in the caravan down there, meet at Metro Relief at 9 o'clock and go down with the group and do some setting up. Kirk is doing a massive pile of barbecue to celebrate. We're going to feed the whole neighborhood Kirk barbecue. And it's going to be a sweet, sweet celebration of 5 years of bulldogging in South Dallas. Come celebrate that with us. Now, have I covered all? We had a lot of stuff to cover this week. I think that's it. Guys, if you'll pass Bibles, pens, and bulletins. My lovely assistants, you're going to need a Bible, you're going to need a pen, and you're going to need a bulletin. If you're missing any of that, raise your hand. And these sweet folks will come through and meet all of those needs in your life. A Bible, a pen, and a bulletin. One of you is going to betray me. His disciples stared at one another, at a loss to know which of them he meant. And one of them, the disciple whom Jesus loved, was reclining next to him. Simon Peter motioned to this disciple and said, ask him which one he means. Leaning back against Jesus, he asked him, Lord, who is it? And Jesus answered, it's the one to whom I will give this piece of bread when I have dipped it in the dish. Then dipping the piece of bread, he gave it to Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot. And as soon as Judas took the bread, Satan entered into him. So Jesus said, what you're about to do quickly. But no one at the meal understood why Jesus said this to him. Since Judas had charge of the money, some thought Jesus was telling him to buy what was needed for the festival or to give something to the poor. As soon as Judas had taken the bread, he went out, and it was night. You know, there's two old cliches that I've heard all my life, and I'm going to bet anything you've heard them too. The two cliches are, knowledge is power, and ignorance is bliss. Now, it's kind of hard to put those two together and make a lot of sense out of that. Now, you people know I'm all about words. Stunned? I'm all about words and how to use them and where they came from and what to do with them. And so in our preparation for our lesson tonight, I got online and did some Googling around to see where those two cliches came from. And the answer I got was, first of all, in the late 1500s, the late 16th century, knowledge is power. The first time it's write that down. I'm glad I don't know the depth of my own sin. You know, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John were four of Jesus' inner circle of 12 closest friends who knew him best. And all four of them wrote down how they saw and they remembered the exact same things. They were with Jesus through all the pieces of his ministry. And it's interesting to see each one of them remember it and retell it. And each one of them will have seen something a little different than the other one saw, or missed something that the other one didn't. I like how Matthew remembers all this in Matthew 26. So let's move back just a little bit. Matthew 26, page 695. And listen to Matthew, remember, and describe this very same moment we just read from John. Verse 20. When evening came, Jesus was reclining at the table with the 12. And while they were eating, he said, "Truly I tell you, one of you will betray me." And they were very sad, and began to say to him one after the other, "Surely you don't mean me, Lord." Now notice there's a question mark on that sentence. Each one of them was asking Jesus, "Is it me? Don't let it be. Surely it's not me. Don't let it be me." And it was a wise thing for them to ask that question. It was a really wise response they had when Jesus said, "One of my 12 closest friends sitting here at this table with me is going to betray me tonight." And I love their response. They did not say, "Well, not me. Ain't going to happen." Peter did not say, "Oh, well, I know who you're talking about." Clearly, he's talking about Bartholomew. Because Bartholomew has been acting very strangely lately. And we've seen him out walking through those fields talking to himself. There's just something a bubble off and not quite right about Bartholomew. Clearly, that's who Jesus is talking about. Peter did not say that. Thomas didn't say, "Oh, yeah, well, we all know who that is. It's Peter." You know, just the other day, Jesus looked Peter right in the face and said, "Get behind me, Satan." He says, you know, by and large, I figure anybody that Jesus calls Satan is going to be the betrayer if anybody's going to do it. And you know, Thomas didn't say that. John did not say, "Well, clearly that's Thomas. You know, he doesn't have enough faith to walk across the room with. That guy doubts absolutely everything. With that much doubt and that little faith, if somebody's going to screw this thing up and betray the Lord, it's got to be Thomas." And John didn't say that. It's very interesting to me that what Matthew remembers is that all of them said, "Oh my, could it be me? Is it going to be me?" Now, I'm going to tell you something about myself you already know, and I'm going to broaden the statement I'm making about me, and I'm going to make it about you too. So write it down. There is no sin we are not capable of. Now, some of us are a whole lot more capable of some things than others. I mean, let's just throw it out there and call it like it is. You've heard me say, if you've been walking this walk with me for very long, if we've been hanging out doing this for a while, you've heard me say several times, dinner, and for some reason they're all crammed into the same side of the table. Have you ever noticed that? There's two sides you could sit on, and they're all squeezed in on one side, looking out at who knows what on the other side. Really, probably historically, this meal didn't look like that at all. First of all, they didn't traditionally have one big old long table. Their tables were U-shaped, were curved, where you would see the people across from you in that direction. And they were very, very low tables. They didn't have dining room chairs that you sat in and pulled up to a dining room table. They had a very, very low table. They didn't sit in chairs. They sat on cushions on the floor. And it was traditional that you would take your place on your cushion and lean to your left. So you are leaning against the person to your left. There were two places of honor at the table. The host, the one in charge of the meal, sat in the very middle of that curved U. And the positioned to the left and to the right were the positions of honor. That's where special guests would sit, on either side of the host. Now it says that John, Jesus' closest friend, the one whom Jesus especially loved, was sitting at his right, leaning over against Jesus. Jesus was leaning to his left against who? Judas. It says that Jesus was leaning against Judas the very night that Judas sold him to die. Leaning against him. Notice also, if the host wanted to really honor somebody at that meal, before everybody else was served, they would take a piece of meat or a piece of bread, dip it in the sauce, and make an obvious presentation. It was a grand tradition. Hand that first piece of food to the one you especially want to honor. And who did Jesus dip the bread and hand it to? Judas. What's Jesus saying in all that? Jesus is saying, Judas, I love you. You matter to me. It's not written, but I can hear the whole heart of Jesus exploding in that moment saying, Judas, don't do this. It's not too late to change your mind. Back off. Please don't do this thing. An amazing appeal of royal love in the middle of one of history's deepest moments of hate. Finally, write this. I'm glad I don't know the blackness of a night without Christ. I want you to actually write down, we've read it twice now, but I want you to write down what it says in John 13, verse 30. It says, as soon as Jesus had taken bread, he went out. I've still got a couple of minutes, Jason. He went out, and it was night. Write that down. That last phrase was not tacked on for dramatic effect. The Holy Spirit went to great lengths to very carefully select every single word that He left for all of eternity in God's Word about that night. He didn't tack that on as stage directions for dramatic effect. Satan took over that night. And Judas went out into the dark. You know, woven all the way through John's Gospel are the recurring themes of day and night, light and dark, and the astounding difference between the two. You know, I can tell God's people real quickly when I meet somebody. Because people of the light live differently. They move differently. They see things differently than people of the dark. And probably the moment that we notice it the most is at the very end of our walk, isn't it? It's at the very end of our walk. It's when we are transitioning off of planet Earth that you can see the biggest difference between the people of the dark and the people of the light. I've shared with you several times that I am a deep, deep fan. I'm trying to think of a better word because it doesn't quite fit with what I'm about to say. I'm a great fan of cemeteries. I love cemeteries. And if you know me, you know that. And it's not because I'm ghoulish and like to walk around places over people's dead bones. I mean, that's not the point. There is something so powerful to me about a cemetery. That you can go into a community where you've never been and don't know a soul. And you can walk through that place and read the words that were selected to sum up those lives and carved in that marble. And it's always fascinating to me. I've shared with you, some of you, that my family for 6 generations is all buried around our little hometown of Chilton, Texas, down south of Waco. And I've made many trips through the years back to the grave of my great grandfather Featherston, who was buried, died of old age in 1882, and is buried there near our hometown. And he has a piece of marble up this high. I mean, they invested in something to remember the old man by. Big piece of marble, and his wife chose, when he died, the words to sum up all of it. And on the side, engraved in that marble, almost 150 years ago, it says, "Husband dear, take thy rest. The summer flowers will bloom, while thou, the dearest and the best, doth wither in the tomb." Don't you know that old girl was a lot of fun? Every time I go by and read that, I go, really? That's the statement here at the end? I loved you a lot, and you're rotting down there underneath my feet. You're worm food. I mean, I don't know what to say. But you know, with our family in that same little town is a stone to sum up my dad. And when he was in the hospital and knew that he didn't have long left, he brought me into his bedside, asked to visit with me alone. And he said, "Here's how I want this to go." And he gave me very deep instructions about his funeral. He didn't want a funeral. He wanted a celebration. And he said, "I want a stone there with my ancestors. And I want it to have my name. And the date I was born and the date God took me home. And I want engraved in marble for all the generations to follow me right under all of that." I had a difference between the people of light and the people of dark. The people of dark come to the end of this road to go wither in the tomb. And the people of light come to the end of this world and say, "Yee-haw." I can imagine a darkness so deep I don't ever want to imagine, because it was a darkness where he walked away from Christ. Light is anywhere Jesus is. So, where is Jesus? Thank you, Michael. Anybody else understand? We walk out of here back into the darkness I came from. In the name of God, I'm going to walk into the light. I've seen the dark. Have you? Wow. Y'all are healthier than I knew you were. 5 of us have had dark times in our lives. All the rest of you who had no response to that, would you stand and explain to me how wonderful your life looks to have never experienced darkness? I've seen the dark, haven't you? Yes. I've been there. And with God as my witness, I can't bear to face what that is out there without the light walking with me, in me, beside me. So in the name of the one who is the light, a piece of time for you, me, us, to open our hearts and let him hear from us. That's what we're going to do next. In a few minutes, these guys are going to lead us in some worship. And while they do, I'm going to ask you to stand up in a minute. And while they do, your only assignment during that time is to let him hear from you. He's here. Talk to him. Please don't take back out the door the darkness you brought in. If you brought in some darkness tonight, drop it here in the light and go back out with him walking beside you and never have to feel that darkness again. If somebody praying with you or for you would bless you, I'll be right over here. Linda's coming back to the table. We'd be so honored, either one of us, to pray with you and for you. Or so would anybody in this room. I don't see anybody in this room that would not be honored to pray with you. And then, Jesus Christ, the higher power of this fellowship, attends every single Overcomers meeting. He has not missed one of those meetings yet. He will be in that circle waiting to hear our hearts tonight. And so we're going to take a break here in a minute and circle those chairs. Come sit with him. There's nothing out in that dark that's cooler than sitting in a circle with him. Stay and do that with us. For the next few minutes, let him hear from you. Let's stand up.